بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمد ونصلي على رسول الكريم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ask him to send peace and blessing his beloved and our beloved Sayyidina Muhammad sallallaho alayhi wa sallam. This continuation regarding reading, we finished last time on Ameen and Surah Fatiha, and now about reading the other surahs, Hadith, the narrations of Imam Malik rahmatullah alayhi, as we do in the commentary of the Muwatta. According to Shah Waliullah's commentary of Muwatta in his book Muswwa, which is a commentary of Muwatta, he narrates the narration of it. So the chapter is on it being mustahab. It's rewarded to read a long surah in the Fajr Salat, in Salatul Subh in the morning. Imam Malik narrated from Hisham bin Urwa, who narrated from his father Urwa, who narrated from Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, that, he narrated that Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, he prayed Subh, Fajr, Salatul Fajr as Imam, and he recited in Surah Baqarah in both the rakats, in each rakat. Malik narrated from Hisham bin Urwa, who narrated from his father, that he heard Abdullah bin Amir bin Rabi'a say that we prayed behind Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu as-subh, the Fajr Salat, and he read in Surah Yusuf and Surah Hajj, and his qira'atan bati'atun, very slow recital. Then he said that I said to him, فَقُلْتَ إِذَنْ لَقَدْ كَانَ يَقُومْ حِينَ يَطْلُعُ الْفَجْرُ فَقَالَ أَجَلْ. He said he must have started the Fajr like right at the beginning of Fajr, like they would have the Azan like right at the beginning of Fajr time, to get that much qira'ah in, and it's recited these big surahs, or as we would consider them big surahs. That means he would have had to start Fajr like for most of the time between the start of Fajr till sunrise. So it would have been a very long reciting. Imam Malik narrated from Yahya bin Sa'id and Rabi'at bin Abi Hamid Abdurrahman ibn Abi Abdurrahman, narrated from Qasim bin Muhammad, that Al-Farafisa bin Umair Al-Hanafi, that he said, I took the Surah Yusuf. I didn't take Surah Yusuf from anyone. I didn't memorize Surah Yusuf from anywhere else, except for the reciting of Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu, going through all the Khalifas, the Khulafa Rashidin, that because of how much min qira'at Uthman ibn Affan iyaha fi subhi min kathrati ma kan yuraddidu, that he read Surah Yusuf so many times that he memorized a surah in the Salat. I mean, they had phenomenal memories, but to memorize the whole surah, but from the Salat. There's a brother here, he memorized Surah, I read Duha a lot, you probably noticed. He memorized Surah Duha from, so sometimes that's a brother here, just a normal brother, and a normal Imam, reading Surah Duha, and he memorized Surah Duha just from it's repetition, right? Memorization is repetition. Allah exalt, what does Allah tell Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when Rasulullah was started repeating it? And Rasulullah started repeating when the ayat, like not to forget it. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him, this is not for him, he's exempted. Not us. We have to do repetition. There's no other way for us. But for Rasulullah, because he doesn't have to concern himself with that. Allah has taken responsibility to preserve the Quran in his heart. But for the rest of us, we have to make all that effort to memorize whatever we can. Malik narrated from Nafi', narrated from Abdullah bin Umar, that he used to read in the Fajr, in his travel, the first 10 surahs of Mufassal. Now the Quran, the detail in terms of the surahs, which surahs are Mufassal is, and then it's even divided into 3 parts as well. So it starts, there's difference of opinion on what this is, but generally many of the Imams say it starts from Surah Hujurat and goes to the end. But then you divide it in 3 sections. The first 10 of, so if you take Hujurat, those surahs are there. Which juz in Hujurat in 26? 26. So 26 and those onwards. So they're not very long, but they're not very short either. And so the first 10, now he mentions here that he used to read this, and then he used to read it in Safar, like while he's traveling. And their traveling is not, right? I had a Umrah with a brother here earlier on, explaining going through the Umrah. He's going first time, he's going Umrah, we're going through the Ahkam. And my father, rahmatullah, said this, people just want to get out of ihram. They want to get out of, once they finish Hajj, they want to get out of ihram, they want to get out of the haram. The nafs is missing the comforts or whatnot. Generally, people just want to come back. after a certain point, they reach a point where they say like they've had enough. They miss their wife, even if they're with their wives. You know, they wanna come back to their comforts. But I told him, I said, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he did Hajj, or anybody historical did Hajj, 10 to 15 days, there was a travel between Makkah and Medina Munawwarra. 10 to 15 days. That means from Zul Hulayfa, which is in Medina, almost. It's now an outskirts of Medina Munawwarra city. So 10 days therein. 10 days they're in ihram with all the restrictions of ihram. Can't use perfume, can't cut hair. So if you think about it, like, and they're traveling not in a car with the AC, they're traveling by camel or by walking. So it's a challenging journey. So when you say that he's reading the beginning of those surahs while he's traveling, what are we reading when we're traveling? Wattini wa zaytun, wal asr, and inna ataynaka al-kawsar, and Surah Ikhlas, pretty much. In every rakat probably Surah Ikhlas too, because we're traveling. So Imam Nafi', he was a freed slave of Abdullah ibn Umar. He says about Abdullah ibn Umar, they used to read بالعشر سور الأول من مفصل في كل ركعة بأم القرآن والسورة. So he used to read the Surah Fatiha and then one of these surahs. Imam Malik narrated with his chain narration that Umar ibn Khattab, he wrote to Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiyallahu anhu. He was one of the governors of is always appointed during the Khilafah of the Khulafa Rashidin. He's one of the ulama, fuqaha of the jurists of the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum, and also he was a governor. He was given important posts during the Khulafa Rashidin. He said, pray Fajr, salli subha wal nujumu badid mushtabak. So pray the Fajr, the subh, the morning prayer, when the stars are still twinkling in the sky, meaning not very late, in the early part of it. And he said, وَقْرَ فِيهَا بِسُورَتَيْن طَوِيلَتَيْن مُفَصَّل, and to read 2 long surahs from this section of the Quran which I mentioned. Shah Waliullah said, I said that Abu Isa, قال أبو عيسى كان عمد واسع في هذا الانتهاء, that this matter, Abu Isa is Tirmidhi, Abu Isa Tirmidhi, this is well known as kunya, that he used to say that this matter is wasi', it's open-ended, so not to be too rigid in it, but he said that the best is that it doesn't become too heavy on the people. If long reciting is going to become difficult and people are going to stop coming to the masjid, right? Then to read from the long ones of Mufassal, this section of the Quran. If you read one day, you read Baqarah, next day the empty mosque will be empty. They're not going to. Once I prayed Dhuhr behind an Imam in one city, and I don't think we missed. I think he read Surah Baqarah in Dhuhr, so we don't know what he's reading, and we don't know when this is the rakat is not going to send. This rakat is not going to end. Somebody should check. He's still here with us. Maybe he died while he was standing in the qira'ah. But it was one of the longest. It's the longest Zuhr definitely in my life. First rakat. No one missed takbir ula that day. Takbir tahrima on that day. But anyway, he no warning either. Just out of the blue. If it's difficult on the people, then to read, you can read the long. It's acceptable to read the long ones from this section, from Surah Hujurat onwards. As per the Hadith of Umar. And upon this is the majority of people of knowledge. وَعَلَيْهِ أَكْثُرُ أَهْلِ الْعِلْمِ. And he said that in the subh, Shah Waliullah saying in the subh that Ibn Umar, that he recited, because Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, he used to follow imams. Like he wasn't leading salat when he was back home in Medina Munawwarra, wherever he lived, Medina Munawwarra. So he was never an imam. He was a muqtadi always. Because in Muqtadi, so this just is coincidental that he's traveling. Do you understand? Like back home, he happened to be in his group and he was the Imam there, but that's not a comparison to something, it's just coincidental. Not, it's ittifaqi, right? It's waqi'i, like it's not it's actually, there's a qayd ihtirazi, qayd ittifaqi, and waqi'i, like it's coincidental that it is mentioned, but it doesn't add anything to the argument because back home, when he's not Imam, so there's nothing to compare it against in terms of leading salat. And he said, and the reason why is إِذَا كَانَ مُقِيمًا فَلَمْ يَرَ نَافِذَ ذَلِكَ مِنْهُ إِلَّا فِي السَّفَرِ. The only time that he saw him lead salat, so you can't really use. The reason why it's important, what's a big deal with Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, a Sahabi, companion Prophet, a young Sahabi, Umar radiallahu anhu's son, But in terms of faqaha, in terms of he was known for his profuse or particularness in following the sunnah, adhering to the sunnah, strictly adhering to the sunnah, like in every little detail. So for him to do something was noteworthy. By his student and freed slave Nafi' is taking notes on what he's noticing, the things that he does. Even Sayyidina Aisha, I mentioned this before about him, that Sayyidina Aisha radiallahu anha and other Sahaba were appreciated the istiqamah of when all the different trials and difficulties came afterwards, divisions came and so forth. Said Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu was known for his strong istiqamah, his steadfastness. He was not affected, he did not change. Other people were affected, they adjusted things. Not like dealing with the realities on the ground and whatnot. He was known for his strict adherence. No matter what was happening, he was doing what was there before and afterwards. Even the senior Sahaba, like the wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like others, Fuqaha, jurists of Sahaba, they appreciated his istiqamah, his steadfastness. What to read in Maghrib and Isha and in Dhuhr and Asr. Ibn Shihab, Malik narrated from Ibn Shihab, narrated from Muhammad bin Jubair bin Mut'im, who narrated from his father, that he said, I heard Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam read in Maghrib Surah Tur, right, in the 27th juz. And Malik narrated from Ibn Shihab, narrated from Ubaydullah bin Abdullah bin Utbah, from Ibn Mas'ud, from Abdullah bin Abbas, that Fadl bint Haris, she said that she heard him and he was reading وَالْمُرْسَلَاتِ عُرْفًا, and she said that when he recited this, she goes, you reminded me, oh my dear son, يا بني لقد ذكرتني بقراءتك هذه السورة لأن لآخر ما سمعت من رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقرأ بها في المغرب. She goes, this is the last surah that I heard Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم reciting in Salatul Maghrib. Imam Malik narrated from Yahya bin Sa'id bin Adi bin Thabit al-Ansari and narrated from Bara bin Azib. They said, I prayed with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam Isha, and he read in his Wattini was Zaytun. Another narration mentioned Riyadh al-Salihin that because I prayed behind Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Isha, he read Wattini, and I've never heard a more beautiful reciting or more beautiful recital than that of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Of course it would be. How that would sound, we can only imagine. Shah Waliullah said that majority of the people knowledge say that it's sunnah that in the subh, in the fajr prayer, in the dhuhr, the fard, is to read the long mufassal surahs, as I mentioned before. And in asr and isha to read the middle ones, from one nazi'at, approximately, there's difference of opinion on this, I'm just giving, from Hujurat till one nazi'at, to read the longer ones of the mufassal. And then in the asr and isha, there's a majority of the people knowledge. Not everybody says this, but majority of the people knowledge. And asr and isha to read the middle ones, which is like from nazi'at to, who's up to duha, I think duha, roughly, approximately, the middle. And then maghrib to read the really short ones, which is till the end. Abu Isa Tirmidhi said, as he narrated from the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the tabi'een, they sometimes used to read more than this, sometimes they used to read less than this. كان الأمر عندهم واسع. The matter was, among them was vast, it was open-ended. Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah said, in regards to reciting, it's a tur mursalat in Maghrib, because I don't dislike this, but I think this is mustahab, this is something that is good. The permissibility, the chapter on the permissibility of reciting a surah or 3 or 4 and reciting 2 surahs or 3 in a rak'ah, right? So Imam Malik narrated from Abu Ubayd, the freed slave Sulaiman ibn Malik, and Ubadah, who narrated from Ubadah bin Nasi, who narrated from Qais ibn Haris, that and who narrated from Abu Abdullah Sanabihi, that he said, I came to Madinah Munawwarra in the Khilafah of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu during his reign as a Khalifa, and I prayed behind him Maghrib Salat, and he read in the first 2 rak'ahs Fatiha and a short surah, surah min qisar al-mufassal. Then he stood up for the third. I went near him until like my clothes nearly touched his clothes. And then he was reading, he read Surah Fatiha, and then he read قرأ بأم القرآن وبهذه الآية ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. He recited this. It's an ayat, it's also a dua as well. Ya Allah, don't make our hearts, after you've guided, not to mislead, to lead us astray. And then we seek from you mercy. Indeed, you're the one that gives gifts. Imam Malik narrated from Nafi', they narrate from Abdullah bin Umar, that he, and this is considered the strongest chain in Hadith, is that Malik narrates from Nafi', and narrates from Abdullah bin Umar, that whenever he prayed by himself in the 4 rakats, he used to read in every rakat, fard salat. If he ever prayed, he goes, each rakat, he used to read a surah, a Fatiha and a surah. Generally reading the first 2 and the last 2. And sometimes he used to read, in each rakat, he used to read 2 surahs or 3 surahs. You can read more than 1 surah in each rakat. We were once in one masjid in ICV, and we had a train to catch. It's very rare, but it happened to be in that day. So the Imam is leading the salat, was with a brother, and he's leading the salat, and he finished Wadduha, like we're in a hurry, we're going to miss the train. And then he pauses for a while, and then he goes, Alam nashrah laka sadrak. Come on, man. Like on this day, you had to practice this masala. But anyway, like we were running to the station. But anyway, so you can do more than 1 rakah. And he read in the Maghrib, when you pray the 2 rakats of Maghrib, meaning the fard, the first of the fard salah, the first 2 rakat, he read a surah in each one, meaning not in the third one. Fil Alamgiriya is a Fatawa Hindiya, and the Hanafi Fiqh is encyclopedia. I mentioned about this before. That the first 2 rakat of fard, Fatiha is read, and but it's makruh to read in the second 2 rakats. But Imam Muhammad ibn Hassan Shaybani Rahimahullah, Imam Hanifa's student, one of the two chief students of Imam Hanifa. They had many students, but Imam Abu Yusuf, Qadi Abu Yusuf was one, and Imam Muhammad ibn Hassan was the other. And he said in Muwatta, so there's Muwatta Imam Muhammad, there's Muwatta, we study in Madrasa, we study Muwatta Imam Malik, you could say the original, and then he said Muwatta Imam, the Hanafis will get upset about this, and Muwatta Imam Muhammad, Muwatta Imam Muhammad, basically the same in narrations, but then he also adds the fiqh and the positions of, but he said, Kullu dhalika hasan, all of this is good, acceptable, right? How loud should the Imam read in his salat? Imam Malik, the Qadru Jahr Imam fi Salati, Bab. Imam Malik narrated from his uncle, Abu Suhail, who narrated from Abu Suhail bin Malik, who narrated from his father, that he said, we used to hear Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu's recital. Remember that Umar radiallahu anhu is a Khalifa, but he's also leading, he's the Imam of Masjid Nabawi. And he's leading salat, and he goes, we could hear it in the Dari Abi Juhaym bil Balat. Now, how far is the Balat? The back courtyard. We can try to imagine it. The meaning that we heard it from the neighborhood. You can put it maybe like that. That maybe we heard it outside, right, from the house, not inside the masjid, outside the masjid. You could hear his recital. You have to also think about it. The masjid is no roof, right? No windows like we have today, and smaller as well, relatively small. So the noise would, and there's no sound, there's 10,000 cars going around us, buzzing around us. So obviously, and people, they prayed with all the adab and all the hudu, and the hudu of Madinah Munawwarra is famous, the calmness and the tranquility. But you can imagine when everybody's in salat, the whole society's in salat. There's no traffic beeping, while we're praying salat, as in Muslim countries today. So everybody's in the masjid. It'd be surprising if someone not in the masjid. And whoever's outside the masjid, how much noise can they make? And would it be acceptable if somebody in that time prayed outside or doing something else? Like he's working in his workshop, you can hear the hammer, as an example, going while salat. Can you imagine what they think about it? Nobody would do that. Even the munafiqeen in the time of Rasulullah, except for the open munafiqeen, they used to pray in the masjid. So it will be dead. Maybe the ladies work in their houses, maybe that's an exemption. But other than that, it will be absolute silence. So the noise will probably reach quite far. We would assume that Umar radiallahu anhu has a loud voice. I'm making an assumption as well. Wallahu alam. So in Alamgiri it says, if the Imam makes his voice louder, then إذا جهر الإمام فوق حاجة الناس فقد أساء وفيه نظر. Right. So he goes, if he's doing it unnecessarily screaming, he's shouting and he's raising his voice. Now this is a problem. Like the mic has gone up. I don't know. Somebody make changes to this. Sometimes goes up. Sometimes goes down. Sometimes there are complaints coming from people that it's not loud enough. Some of the older uncles, they complain. He goes, they only have to do one thing, is fix the mic. Like so they want to hear hear the salat. So, but how loud do you make it? And how loud do we recite? But it's we should practice sometimes without the mic. I think these things weaken us. and probably weaken our voice as well. I mean, if you imagine till 50 years ago, Imams would have to recite, especially imagine the Imams of the big masjids. They would have to recite, I know they build the domes and they built the masjid in a way, but they would have to recite that the voice is projected so far. This, well, I don't know. I think this is just here for looks. I don't think.
Yeah,
I don't think our committee. I don't think our committee understands sound acoustics, maybe that level. But we have this, so we don't need to worry about that too much. But in the past, the masjid were designed. But the thing is, the mihrab in the time of Rasulullah, there was no mihrab. The mihrab was introduced. The mihrab that we have today, the mihrab meaning that a niche was made into the mosque where the imam prays. This was a time in the Khilafah of Umar ibn Aziz rahmatullah alayhi. So it's not necessarily sunnah. Even Masjid Nabawi that we have, this was made later on, like a place. Yes, that was a spot where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed as a mihrab Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but there wasn't like a mihrab as we. The masjid was simple. It was just a wall in front. His masjid was the simplest of masjids. So anyway, so how loud the imam should not read more than is necessary because it causes you harm the people. So even there, it's considered this is something that, but this is something that is academically, there's speculation on this. What is the acceptable level of loudness for the imam? And this is the last bab for tonight. It is sunnah to make takbeer every time that a person goes down and in every action that a person. Imam Malik narrated from Shihab, the narrator from Ali bin Hussein bin Ali bin Abi Talib, that he said that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to make takbeer in salat every time he used to go down, every time he used to come up, and this is how he prayed till when he laqi Allah azza wa jalla, he met Allah, meaning he passed away. Ibn Shihab, Imam Malik narrated from Ibn Shihab, narrated from Abu Salama bin Abdul Rahman bin Auf, who narrated from Abu Hurairah radhiyallahu anhu, that he used to pray every time going down, every time going up, meaning the actions that make takbeer. Make takbeer, say Allahu Akbar, and when he left the salat as well. And and this is the resemblance of the salat of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Malik narrated from Shihab, narrated from Salih bin Abdullah bin Umar, and that Abdullah bin Umar, he used to make takbeer in salat every time he went down and up. Imam Malik narrated from Na'im, Wahab bin Kaysan, Jabir bin Abdullah, that they used to teach him the takbeer of salat, and he said that he taught us to make takbeer that every time that we go down, every time we come up. And he said that اتفقت الأمة على هذا التكبيرات. Shah Waliullah says وهي 22 تكبيرة في 4 ركعات. There are 22 takbeers in 22 takbeers 22 تكبيرة in 4 rakats. All of them are sunnah except for the first takbir, and that is a fard, and the salat is not commenced until the first takbir is done. Takbiratul ula, takbiratul tahrima. The salat is not enacted. لا تنعقد الصلاة لا تنعقد الصلاة إلا بها. Salat is not commenced if that takbir is not done. It's fard to do the opening takbir. As for the takbirat, there will be difference of opinion, it's sunnah or wajib. Inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us understanding and tawfiq to practice.